Whilst traversing across the Pilgrim's Way, the 140-mile route between the southern English cities of Winchester and Canterbury, I came across an individual whom, whilst not being a saintly figure, was a member of the royal family, but doesn't feature very prominently in the history books. And his shrine, his grave, does not necessarily bring pilgrims from all across the Christian world to go and visit. But it does seem to sort of pop up every now and then in 12th century English history as being part of some of England's sort of turning point moments, like the Anarchy Civil War and witness to Thomas à Becket's assassination. He was also regarded as the wealthiest and, dare I say, most powerful man in England, below that of the King of England himself. So who is this individual? Well, you can tell exactly by the title of this video. This gentleman's name was Henry of Blois. And if you can get through the intro to this video, I will tell you exactly who he is. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to you all. From those down the road to the folks around the world. Welcome back to another video. And I'm going to keep my promise and tell you exactly who Henry of Blois really was. And the story of his life from when he first arrived in England in 1126 to when he eventually died in 1171. Now, just whilst I flip this video for just a moment and add a little bit of context, because it's important that we have some for these sorts of things. Henry of Blois is a member of the royal family during the late 11th, early 12th century. And here I've drawn on this little whiteboard a sort of simplistic version of that family tree of the royal family. Here I have Henry of Blois prominently placed here with all these lines. And he is the grandson to that of William the Conqueror, who of course came over in 1066 and, well, conquered England over the next sort of subsequent 20 years or so. William the Conqueror had a daughter named Adela, who in turn was the mother to Henry of Blois, and also Henry's brother, King Stephen. Now, Stephen was in a sort of royal dispute, an argument that turned into a civil war known as the Anarchy, with her cousin Empress Matilda, who in turn had been promised the crown of England by her father, Henry I. Henry of Blois, during this period known as the Anarchy, which spread from 1135 right up until 1153, sided with both Matilda and Stephen at various points during that civil war, during this anarchy period. Henry of Blois was born in the year 1096. In the days and weeks before, his father, the Count of Blois, also called Stephen, went off on crusade to take back Jerusalem for that of the Christian people. There is the dispute, however, that Henry was actually born in 1100 or 1101, when the Count returned from his crusade. But let's stick with the former rather than the latter. Henry was born in the year 1096, the youngest of all the sons between the Count of Blois and the Princess Adela. He was educated at Cluny Abbey, which is just south of Blois itself. And this is where he learned his discipline, and his devotions to God became very, very strong. It was then in 1126 that Henry of Blois was invited by the Duke of Normandy, King of England, Henry I, to come across the English Channel and to become the new abbot at the Abbey of Glastonbury. Henry of Blois politely accepted, crossed the Channel and took up the position as Abbot of Glastonbury. But as soon as he started to integrate himself over the next few years of his life, he began to adore Glastonbury Abbey and the community that was there. And as he tried to progress his career to become more prominent and more powerful amongst the English religious communities, he would try desperately to keep hold of his position as Abbot of Glastonbury because he enjoyed being there, because he enjoyed what was there in that community and in that space. He was sidelined as the next Archbishop of Canterbury, the most highest ranking of all of the religious figures in the English Church, because he wanted to stay as the Abbot of Glastonbury. He would become, in 1129, the Bishop of Winchester, another high-ranking figure, but not quite as high as the Archbishop of Canterbury. But he would try, as desperate as he could, to take the circumstance that he had as the Abbot of Glastonbury and as the Bishop of Winchester, and try and become powerful in other ways as well. In 1139, this became the reality. You see, Pope Innocent II commissioned Henry of Blois to be a papal legate, spelled like this. And what that means is that Henry was to be a sort of a foreign diplomat, a representative to the interests of the Pope to different foreign nations, in this case, of course, being England. Now, within the Christian faith, or the Catholic Church as it is today, there are certain rankings and certain order of precedence between the different positions that one can be given within the faith. So, of course, you have your Pope at the very top and the cardinals that sit just underneath. You have your archbishops somewhere in the middle, fairly prominent in each and every country, but a papal legate sits above that of the archbishops, but below that of the cardinal. So Henry of Blois, at times, became the most powerful man in England, besides that of King Stephen, his brother. But he was also the richest man in England, and all because of his position as the Bishop of Winchester. Now, the city of Winchester had always served very prominently within English history. There's a lot of wealth coming through, there's a lot of trade coming through. And Winchester even served as England's capital city during the Anglo-Saxon period. So, as is within medieval life, wealth begets wealth. There's a lot of money, there's a lot of trade coming into the cathedral doors and into the city in general. So this is why the bishopric of Winchester is so wealthy. And it was actually one of the most sought after positions within the English Church because of this wealth, because of this influence that the money brings. But this power was rather short-lived, because in 1143, Pope Innocent II sadly died, and his successor, Pope Celestine II, did not recommission Henry of Blois as a papal legate. So Henry was pleading with the Pope to get him that position back. He even travelled in 1144 all the way to the city of Rome in order to request the Pope to make him that papal legate again. But it was unsuccessful. However, he did gain a lot of favours, benefits and good graces for Glastonbury Abbey. Then in 1154, Henry's older brother, the King of England, Stephen, also sadly died, and his successor was Henry II, son to Empress Matilda, whom of course had that great rivalry the two cousins did. So Henry of Blois' position within politics is not going to be high and mighty as it once was with his older brother as the king. So Henry of Blois decided to retire for a couple of years or so, going back to the Abbey of Cluny, taking with him his vast fortunes and great treasures as well, and doing a little bit of work by reorganising the Abbey's system and general proceedings, a general reformist to the Abbey there. Henry of Blois would remain as the Abbot of Glastonbury and the Bishop of Winchester right up until his death in 1171. But let's just go back for a moment to a couple of events that Henry of Blois would have borne witness to during his lifetime. This being the Anarchy period, and more specifically, the Siege of Winchester in 1141, and then the term as Archbishop of Canterbury of Thomas à Becket, and subsequent assassination in 1170. Now, Henry of Blois, like most siblings often do, did not have a great relationship with that of his older brother Stephen. But in 1135, when King Henry I sadly passed, Henry of Blois supported his brother becoming the next King of England. But as the decade progressed and concluded and moved into the next decade, the Empress Matilda, daughter to that of the former King Henry I, became a more prominent figure and became a more prominent successor to the Kingdom of England. She wanted to be the new queen. She wanted to oust Stephen and become the queen herself. After the Battle of Lincoln, on the 7th of February 1141, King Stephen was captured and taken prisoner. And it was soon after this point that Henry of Blois decided to side with his cousin, the Empress Matilda, believing it to be a more advantageous thing to do. But then Henry realised that Matilda was possibly a rather arrogant and greedy figure, and so very soon after switched back to that of King Stephen's side. In the July of 1141, Henry of Blois besieged the royal castle just southwest of the city of Winchester. And in what was seen as a bit of a surprise attack, Empress Matilda relieved the royal castle and forced the retreat of the bishop's men, some going east towards Wolvesey Castle, which was owned by the bishop himself, and the bishop, Henry of Blois, actually fled the city altogether. Empress Matilda decided to set up a headquarters for besieging the city actually inside this royal castle, whilst its own forces attacked the neighbouring Wolvesey Castle. And Empress Matilda's second in command, Robert of Gloucester, decided to set up a garrison very close to Winchester Cathedral. Over the course of the month of August, Wolvesey Castle remained very strong. It had an advantage because it was very newly constructed just 3 years previous, and was actually part of a series of perimeter walls that were supposed to defend the city of Winchester itself. Meanwhile, some of the bishop's men, in retreat from Winchester, decided to burn portions of the city down to the ground in order to reduce the number of provisions that would be available to Robert of Gloucester and, of course, Empress Matilda herself. And finally, Stephen's own wife, Queen Matilda, because everyone seems to be called Matilda in this period, amassed a 1,000-strong army of London militia and hired mercenaries to take back the city of Winchester. Queen Matilda decided to blockade the eastern portion of the city of Winchester, stopping anything from getting through, and the resources inside the city were now starting to dwindle to very low levels. So Robert of Gloucester decided to take action and limit the successes of this particular blockade. He went slightly north and tried to fortify a local abbey, but a contingent of this blockading force met up with Robert of Gloucester, battle ensued, and a retreat by Robert's men was then ensued, with heavy losses on their side. It was decided on the 14th of September 1141 that the forces of Empress Matilda and Robert of Gloucester would flee the city, having been routed now by the forces of Queen Matilda blockading from the east. Some portions of the army went on the road towards Salisbury, and others on the road towards Gloucester. Both contingents of this army suffered massive losses, to the near extermination of all armed men. Only a small portion was actually able to flee towards Gloucester with the Empress Matilda in tow. She was able to escape freely. But as for Robert of Gloucester himself, well, he was captured by the forces of Queen Matilda and ransomed back to Empress Matilda in exchange for the release of King Stephen in the November of 1141. Then the next big moment that Henry of Blois presided over was the election and the consecration of Thomas of Becket as the new Archbishop of Canterbury in 1162, replacing Theobald of Bec, whom Henry of Blois had lost out to for the position of Archbishop of Canterbury because he refused, as I mentioned before, to let go of his abbatcy of Glastonbury. Henry of Blois was a supporter of Thomas of Becket and his wider family and friends, although sometimes it had to be a bit of a secret. Because in 1164, the constitutions of Clarendon were signed by various different bishops and archbishops of England, including Henry of Blois himself. This new constitution would mean that the state and the church would sort of mingle together in certain aspects of society, most notably in the sort of criminality sections of wrongdoing. Becket wanted it to remain as two separate entities. Crimes within the church should stay in the church. Crimes within the state should remain in the state, not necessarily one and the same. Henry of Blois saw over the trial of Thomas of Becket in the October of 1164 at the Council of Northampton. But even then, when Thomas of Becket exiled himself to France, Henry's support was unwavering. Becket returned some years later, made amends with the King of England, Henry II, but was unfortunately assassinated in the December of 1170. Henry of Blois was furious that this event had taken place, and in the last year of his own life, made his objections to the assassination of the Archbishop very clear. Henry of Blois passed away on the 6th of August 1171, hopefully satisfied that Henry II had made his penances for the assassination of this former Archbishop, Thomas of Becket. And finally, I'm going to leave you with a quote which sort of puts objection to everything that I've just said, because a personal friend of Henry's is said to have quoted, "Yet in spite of his noble birth, he blushes when praised." Despite the power plays, being the richest man in England, the most powerful at one time, and despite witnessing some of the biggest moments from the 12th century, blushes when he is praised. Take the quote what you will, and I hope you have a great day. See you in the next video.